For those of you on dry land,
it's if we sunk underwater. That's what we'd sound like.
If we had.
Or
if we were in space, though, and I think we're already dead. And I forget which episode we were in space.
I don't remember either.
If we were the one and only trusty diver guy from Carmen Sandiego, then we would
or
sound
Scuba
like
Steve.
Oh, I missed that show so much.
Oh, that show was great. The live-action game show one.
Yes.
Yeah, not the stupid cartoon.
It was on PBS at 5 p.m. and I watched it every single day.
What was great was it had rockapella.
It did have rockapella. And doo-wop, too.
Yes, and it was my first acoustic band. Not acoustic,
acapella
band.
What would you call that? The Carmen Sandiego band? What was it?
No, their name was Rockapella.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah.
They did Zombie Jamboree, which was
tons
awesome.
of stuff.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel bad.
Why?
Yeah, she had cancer and she died.
Who?
The host.
Really?
Yeah.
She's dead?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
I know.
No, I didn't know that. She was on TV
all these old
a handful of years
PBS
ago.
favorites of mine, like a lot
Bill
of them,
Nye's still around.
A lot of them had
Bill
cancer.
Nye's still around.
I know.
And he's on Dancing with the Stars.
He was not on PBS, though. He was not on PBS.
I heard he did a great job.
No, the Bill Nye show was not a PBS show. It was a Saturday morning.
But it was on PBS.
Are you sure?
Yes.
I think it was CBS.
No.
No, that was Beekman's World, was CBS.
Oh, then he must have been another network, though. I'm really sure that he wasn't
I'm pretty
PBS.
sure he was PBS.
No, he was not PBS.
We'll double check
To be
that.
corrected in the comments, because this is the stuff that matters.
Might have been.
I mean, we're about music or something, but, you know.
Right. Hey, Bill Nye the Science Guy's theme was awesome.
You get me started on
Bill
PBS shows.
Nye the Science Guy.
No, Carmen Sandiego.
That's music, I guess.
The theme song from Carmen Sandiego was phenomenal.
Yeah, it was.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I'd have to work on that.
No, yeah, that would take... Alright.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, I got something to complain about.
What do you have to complain about?
Always welcome.
I always have things to complain about.
This is always welcome.
So, I was in the store, and I was in the mall. I'm not going to say which store. And I'm walking around, and I'm enjoying myself, and I hear Daft Punk come on. The single from the new album.
Get Lucky.
Yep. And the first thought that comes through my mind is, that's a poor follow-up to the previous song, whose name I don't even remember. And then I started mentally kicking myself because I don't know how I can enjoy music the same way. I used to be
what he's
so
trying
vapid.
to say is that we've destroyed ourselves.
Doing this
internally.
podcast has given us depth.
Yes. To the point where we can't enjoy
Well,
a damn
no, it's
single.
like, I recently I can understand what you mean. Like, I went back and listened to some of Maroon 5's older stuff. Not the first record, but stuff between the crap and the old stuff. And I don't like it as much because I'm hearing more of it.
And it's not even that I can't enjoy it. I have to comment on it in my mind. I always have to be weighing it.
Yeah.
Yes, poor follow-up. Really did not work with the following track. Point off.
Yeah.
Anyway, why don't we
it's
just...
my nasally thing there.
Yeah, it was nothing.
Professor, you know.
Your everyday voice is the professor voice.
Of course, a professor from the 20s, though, because modern professors kind of are normal people.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, there we go.
Anyway, so this week is your choice, Steve, so why don't you get us started on it?
All right, I went with Goldfrapp this week. Goldfrapp, which is actually... It's a musical electronic duo. Musical. Make a point to say that they're musical. And Goldfrapp is actually the last name of the female lead, which is Alison Goldfrapp. And the other member is Will Gregory, and he's responsible for most of the back work, the composition, the actual moment-by-moment stuff. Back when they were a lot more electronic-heavy, he worked a lot with synthesizers, and now he's doing full-on string arrangements, which is quite the progression.
So have they been around a while?
1999.
Okay, so yeah, fair amount of time.
And let's just say that this album is a massive step from where they came, as pop at least.
This is a case of him, how I misguided you into thinking it was one thing and another. You told me this was going to be electronica, and I turned it on and went, this is not electronica.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Well, no, to be fair, though, I did announce and say that it they have this weird way of invoking standards. Like
Okay.
old standards from, like, the 50s and 60s. And I guess that element was at least consistent here, because you can hear the
her
crooning
singing
nature.
Yeah.
And, yeah, might as well get right into it.
The first track is Joe, J-O.
Now let's, off the top, I'll just say that this is the kind of album I love reviewing, just
Oh,
because...
we didn't say the title of the album. It's Tales of Us.
Oh, yes, Tales of Us. Titles are usually important.
Yes.
And in this case,
If
they're
you did read it.
extremely important
Yes.
because we are getting Joe's story. That's track 1. It actually is an individualized track-by-track
So just
album.
looking at the track listing when you pull up the album, all of them are just about all of them.
They're
are
all
names.
mononyms, every single one. It's presumably the tale of that person, whether
Yeah.
they're fictional or otherwise. It really draws you into the storyline, which is why they are indeed tales. But as I started to say, this is like, I love reviewing this kind of album just because it's, I mean, to a more standard pop structure, this might seem a little bit slow, a little bit more gentle in its approach, but it's an exercise in subtlety, and I think that's apparent in the first track, because it's, first of all, it takes you back to a time that's kind of bygone, in my opinion. This is very much standard. This is 1950s you're in, but at the same time, it has this futurist superimposition. I don't even know how else to describe that. It's all in the editing.
I have a word.
Go for it.
And excluding the vocals, this music is ambience.
I can't go that far.
I will go that far, and I will keep beating this nail, because it, without the vocals, truly without the vocals, the music itself is not designed around a hook. It's designed around the exploration of the build.
I think this is going to be a point of contention, because I'm going to disagree. I think the hook is the melody. The melody is really the hook. And it really should be. At least a good melody is. And I think almost every single one here is a good melody.
But I'm going to differentiate. We've used hook so much differently in the past. We use it as a chord progression that grabs you, or as
That's
a
true.
feature that grabs you. To say the hook is the entire build?
No,
is-
not the build, the melody itself. Like, let's say, let's get into it here. We start out with this introduction. It's very majestic. It's this sweeping, as I started to say, futurist vibe.
It's extremely engaging for being so slow.
Yeah.
The tempo is very much a relaxing tempo, but it's got intricacies that do keep you eyes open.
Right. And well, first of all, it's not to say that, like, strings stepping in with tremolos is anything new particularly. But the new quality I do think they introduced, which is probably Will Gregory's work, having worked with electronic stuff before, is the cutoffs. These little abrupt cutoffs. The music will be, the sweeping tremolo intro, and then all of a sudden it just stops out of the blue, which is abnormal when you consider that, of course, a string section wouldn't be able to do that. But it does it here, and he reorchestrates. He wrote the music to have this done to it. Provided, of course, and this is one other thing I didn't think we talked about, that this is even an orchestra. Now, I believe that a good portion of this really is, like, actual orchestral work. But just to put it out there, a lot of this stuff is conceivably possible now in the synthesized setting. I mean, I was introduced to certain programs that are able to reproduce full orchestra sounds so authentically that it's almost impossible to tell the difference.
So it could be that this is all technically electronic because he's doing it with the keyboard.
I'm leaving the option open only because I was not able to find out. But, he's also credited as doing string arrangements, but it's synthesized.
Right, but the composition of it is still there.
String arrangements. I don't know what that means,
Going back to the actual use of the strings, the halting cutoff style does an excellent job of creating tension within the music.
It does.
Which is okay, right?
Slow attack, fast release.
Just gonna put it right out there. This song is sad. We're gonna be repeating that quite a bit.
It's also pretty.
This album is
melancholy.
Melancholy. It's also tragic in a way. I mean, at least in tone. There's an epic here that I think deserves a cinematic scope. Whether or not you're into that kind of film, it would probably be, and I am going to call Matt's point here, it would probably be a Requiem of a Dream kind of film.
This
the
was
kind
John-
of the kind of heart wrencher
this was
that
mine.
leaves you. Oh, that was yours.
John brought that up.
It
I
would
was gonna
leave you.
use it at the end.
Well, I think we got to say it up front. Otherwise, we can't talk about the individual.
Okay, both the style of how Requiem was a very much a back and forth between the multiple storylines, and the overall motif of sadness, very similar to this album.
This is the type of album that for some people it might be only worth hearing once, because once you've heard it once, you've kind of taken everything from it, and it was too horribly crippling depressing to listen to again.
See, but I disagree with that interpretation. I can't believe that you just take every single thing from it the first time, because I listened to it 3 times and I picked up more in each time. There are varying degrees of sadness.
Yes.
So, the way I figure it, you can't just say like it's a one-time thing. This is deep stuff.
That's primarily portrayed through the husky vocals. And
Yes.
that's really the
Well,
best
it's-
way to describe her vocals. Inflection is amazing. Range is just, in my opinion, lacking. I will give her...
I don't think it needed a range.
That's a problem for me. The fact that there really was no high notes
Okay,
and
it's-
high emotions created by a higher range, but inflection was so important, especially in Joe, that it was the doubling of the vocals and it was the inflection of the vocals and the inflection competing in the doubling that was just enjoyable. That was just gripping at times.
Well, going back to range, the reason why I don't think it's as necessary is exactly what we started to say before. But the theme of this album is, if you want to put it simplistically, sad. In which case, I don't think you really want a full range of emotions. I think you want to let it stew. In which case, I enjoyed what she does within a relatively small framework. And even then, I think range might be fooling you a little bit. I think she actually has a lot more range than you think, just because of her husky manner of singing. We're gonna go with husky. After all, this band was formed a while ago, so I do believe she might be in her 40s. So this is not young love necessarily. This is a full breadth of maturity and experience, which I think is why I take it a lot more seriously.
And speaking to the love aspect, each of the songs portrays a different style of love and, to some extent, tragic love. This did a great job of creating the idea of searching for someone just so that you don't have to be alone. That's how this is. This is the initial look to defeat your loneliness. And I love some of the line work, and I have to say that most of this album has very poetic, maybe not high poetry everywhere, but a lot of it is very beautiful. And the lines of "it rips through the sky, oh, life figures on" is a great way that it's portraying this feeling.
And let's also talk about the way in which she sings this, because this is where melody is going to come really, really close to me, and I think is going to be one of the reasons, even alone, why I hold this album so closely. It has to do with, first of all, the way it was introduced. Aside from the majestic intro, we're starting to get into just a very steady rhythm here, punctuated between the piano and the upright bass, which is common themes going on here, blended excellently. And then there's this soft fade out, and her vocals just enter right in. Gorgeous melody, so natural, just effortless, with that ever-present pang of sadness. It's present throughout the song, it's present throughout the album. And then in verse 2, it's even more filled out, even more gorgeous, and the strings step in there even more. So everything just seems to push itself along.
It's comping. That's the big thing. Everything's comping her vocals.
Yeah, and gorgeously. I mean, it's all about really the motion, I think, in this album, which it's interesting because considering some of the discrepancies we had, you didn't necessarily see there being much fluctuation, Matt, and I gotta disagree, at least in this first track. At least in this first track.
I didn't say in the first track that there was no variety. I said in the album there's not enough variety and it felt repetitive and the themes were revisited too much. But in the first track, I couldn't tell that.
I knew you were going to bring it up. That's why I led you in.
I mean,
here.
in this track, my biggest problem with the intro track was that on a first listen, it was just kind of slow and unengaging. I didn't really get pulled in like you two did.
Unengaging, I just blatantly have to disagree with. I mean, it's a type of sadness that maybe you just have to relate with, but at least compositionally speaking, it's this is superb work.
I
in
mean,
my opinion.
like I said, I never said it was bad. It's beautiful. But also by the fourth beautiful track, I got tired of saying it was beautiful. Yes, a lot of these songs are really gorgeous.
Well, let's take that one step at a time as we get to those
Right.
tracks. But first of all, I noticed one thing different she's doing with form here. Something that may or may not go back to old standards, but I think it's actually something really fresh and original. Because otherwise these would stay verse and chorus, as they had always been, in a crooner style. But with her, she has this manner of states a verse, has a small transition or a small interlude, states the second verse, pretty much the same thing, but as I said, more filled out, and then, ever so subtly, it moves away from that. Just quietly, it moves to this different chord. She starts packing it on with the sevenths, the ninth chords, even throws an 11th, the sus6. It starts getting so complex, just within the second verse. We're not even at the chorus yet. And then we get to the pre-chorus before that, which is this run, you better run for your life. It starts getting haunting, and then it culminates in the line that John pointed out, oh, it rips through the sky, life figures on. It's that progression which is what really makes the song so empowering to me, that it had more of a hook than I would ever need.
And what was great about that progression is after that high point, it was destroyed. I love the comeback to earth, where they really stripped down that building and layering they were doing and brought it back to the very simplistic style introduction again.
Yeah.
And it was shattering, and there's your tragic ending. It was that shattering moment in the music that was just beautiful.
It was tragic, and even they had toward the end, they had very many moments where I think that might be the spot you're talking about, where everything drops out, and it's she all of a sudden that huskiness is brought really close to the microphone. It's close, it's sensual. I mean, these are the dynamics that I'm talking, which is what make her a standout vocalist. I mean,
I have no complaints about her vocal work. She's a gorgeous singer, and she does a really great job. I don't know, I felt like maybe, not so much in this track, I'll get into it more later, but I felt like in this album, just some of the music seemed too similar to other music earlier in the record. And I pointed it out later in the record as we got to it. But unless there's anything else you guys are leaving out, I have some stuff to say about Annabelle, the second track.
Just minor. I'll just point out that the outro had this very... this is actually, I will say, is taken out of, like, 50s, 60s stuff. It's this minor pentatonic downward spiral. And it fades out that way, which I think is a very classy way.
He talked about pentatonic earlier in another podcast. I remember this one.
Yeah, pentatonic. Well, pentatonic is a lovely way of keeping it relatively elusive. But this song does manage to play around with that as you get into the sus6s and everything. But I think it's one of the reasons why we start off so a little bit ambiguous. Sad, for sure, but a little bit ambiguous, at least as of this first track.
Well, it works in the theme work because there's no one person this desire for love is being focused upon.
Right.
And, okay, Annabelle.
So track 2, Annabelle, from the very beginning you get this beautiful guitar work.
Great texture in the guitar.
Oh, yeah. This is a straight-up classical guitar, in style, at least. Gentle acoustic. It's strange, actually, the pull away from the grandeur of the first track. Like, all of a sudden, this is... I say this very lightly, but it's almost the kind of thing you'd expect to hear, like, in style, in, like, a coffee shop. In a very smaller environment. This isn't a crooner style. This is not meant for the large stage.
Yeah.
This is something a little bit more down to earth.
A little more intimate.
A little more introverted, also.
It also speaks to the theme work that's presented in the lyrics. This song really explores the idea of the perfect lover, the perfect individual, and how it's, to be honest, unattainable.
Yeah.
It's got that, which I like the idea. I did have issues with the repetitive back and forth of the vocals. Low to high, low to high, low to high. It got wearing.
And
that just occurred just between the verses and the choruses, which I think are forgivable in my opinion. I think if I had any problems with this track, just as a second, objectively speaking, because I still enjoyed it very much so, but objectively I do agree that there's the progression here is not as apparent as it was in the opening track. The opening track, I already walked you through. The progress here is... It keeps raising the bar every single section. Here, there's a little bit more of a repetition going on. It is somewhat...
The progression essentially is seen in that first time you hear the upright bass, or what we're surmising is an upright bass, because it wasn't even perfectly clear, but Steve's pretty sure it was. And it has this kind of bum kind of accent.
No, you're thinking of track 3. You're thinking of Drew.
Am I?
I believe you are.
No.
Yeah.
No, the bum was in Annabelle.
They may have done that several times, because I noticed there was a punctuation here throughout this where, relatively
there
speaking...
was a bass of some kind that punctuated it.
And it would be kind of strong, almost out of place for the sake of the crooning nature. But I still enjoyed it. It's.
But there was a big problem with it, and that was the outro. The outro was really beautiful. And it was amazing.
Be clear here. The problem is the outro that's beautiful.
The problem is that you go from a very slow build to a rapid ascension in the outro that really is, in my opinion, a lot better than the previous part of the song.
No, I understand. Here's the thing.
Had it been drawn, I would have liked it. It would have been that same raising to higher ground we got in the first track, we got in Joe.
Yes.
But it was abrupt, and it was great for what it was, but it was not disconnected, just too much too fast.
I feel like that part of the song...
It is... I can't go so far as to say abrupt, but there is a little bit of a static nature through the core middle of this song that I think is a little bit tough to deal with.
This is one of those songs that, like you would say on other albums... I like moments, but the whole song I just don't love. That end part I liked so much better than a good chunk of the rest of the song.
But I want to play devil's advocate here. Keeping with the theme, and keeping with her style of singing, which I think really hits one of its most depressing moments here. Just the way her phrasing, when she says the word Annabelle. It's like there's a little bit of a hiccup there. There's a little bit of a breath to go along with how sad this theme is. I have to say, I think the song deserves to stew a little bit toward the middle section. I think deserves to kind of stay there, and then, alright, then do all your swells and your flourishing and all the fancy stuff that comes at the end, which, truth be told, yes, is my favorite part of the song. It's beautiful at the end. It's gorgeous. This, hands down to Will Gregory's composition skills. Objectively, I realize there's a gap, but artistically, I accept it. Artistically, I see what was done here.
But in that case, I cannot reconcile that with the theme work of the song lyrically. The idea, it's a progression of that perfect individual. Not describing it, but just describing what goes along with that kind of a person. And it should have progressed a little more linearly for myself. I think it would have done more for me. If it hadn't been exponential at the end.
Either that, or the song had to be a little bit shorter, perhaps. Because I was going to point out that also the style here, I almost want to pull away from the 50s, 60s crooner. I think they're almost harking back to older themes here, such as operatic arias. I mean, the melodies are that powerful that... that's the whole signature thing about an aria, is that the melody is really what's going to grab you over everything else. And arias are very short. In operas, people think of operas as being these huge, long things, but the arias themselves, the things that everybody waits for, what everybody feels to be the climaxes of that experience, is the 2.5-minute aria. This being so long, it sounds like an extended aria, perhaps unneeded. So I take your point.
I just felt like the middle section did drag a bit on this song. It got repetitive, and it wasn't as engaging as the tail end of the song, which was way more engaging and beautiful.
Still think it's beautiful. Now, as the second song, I don't mind still thinking that. We'll see where your point lies in later. Track 3, 4, etc. So next we have Drew. This kept with the classical guitar. I admit we still have that figuration. A little bit different, of course.
It wasn't exactly the same as the previous song.
Yeah.
This one
it was also a little bit more upbeat. See, we're in E major now.
There was a much heavier showcase on the accenting, that same bass. It did a much better job to bring you in. a little bit faster. You became part of the story a little bit quicker.
I thought
Yeah.
I see it.
I
And
think
for
it had
this,
to do because of the upbeat.
I like this song because it had a climb that seemed. I enjoyed the way the song climbed in that it was a little faster, and it pulled you through it. Not so necessarily rushed, but I just liked the build of this song, and that it kind of took you through it a little faster.
Chord work also, chord wise also, that you take, I mean, from that major setting, you still have those moments that harken back to the set as the theme, so it's still tied in very, very closely, because you throw in like a flat 5 here and there. They'll fall on that, and it's tense for a minute, and then it pulls right back to major. So there's a lot of tug and pull here, which still feels as if it's a positive theme. Now, did you pick up anything lyric-wise here?
Well, I will say I felt before I get into lyrics, I want to talk about something else.
I'm going to talk about the outro in a minute, but...
Yeah, well, the outro actually solidifies the theme. This had those deep, deep accents, and it had great layering, very beautiful layering, but that really wasn't enough for me. It was beautiful, but somewhat vapid in its beauty. And it was... The reason I felt that was because I was hearing this explanation of lost love, of this old love, of the one that got away, sort of a style. It was that, not that first time, not that open time, but that one that was really deep, that really touched you, but is gone now.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the outro does an excellent job of harkening back to that more... the historical
it
high
does, because
point.
the outro is kind of tragic, which I do admit is a bit of a pull from the otherwise upbeat track that we had.
But
I
also,
mean,
this track might have been upbeat because if it's
we have foreshadowing with that flat 5, but you know.
Well, also the looking like the lost love concept. The reason it might be so positive is because looking back on a lost love that you remember fondly. Essentially, that's why it's
that could very well be it.
But it's that outro that solidifies that loss.
Yeah.
Because I said Spanish Western, the thing that comes to mind, that leaps to mind is Carmen.
It does have that kind of a feel, yeah.
Is that feeling.
We're keeping with the aria thing.
Yeah, it was, and it was fun. It was really a good outro. It was really a good outro.
No, it was.
For all of its tragedy, it brought a smile to my face.
Yeah, and smiles are hard to come by in this album. I mean, Ula. I'm not sure. You know, track 4. I think we're thrown right back to tragic at this point, in my opinion. I think it has a lot to do with the predominant cello.
Yeah, the cello work that almost to me sounded like a violin. I couldn't actually tell that it was a cello at first.
High range cello.
Yeah.
Cello in many ways makes up for that range and dynamic qualities, and it kind of echoes her in some ways.
Yeah.
But
it was a little bit ambiguous to me in this track. Now, I admit, the beginning was a little bit ambiguous until she started harmonizing with herself.
Yeah.
When she harmonized with herself, all of a sudden, that was the hook for me. That really was the hook within the melody, and then it was right after that the cello joined.
The first line with that harmonization, it starts with her singing solo instead of duet with herself.
Yeah.
It starts with the line, "Float on glass, a mirror hot," and the doubling comes in with the universe above. And when she doubles that, it's beautiful.
Right, the imagery that goes on right there between the lyrics. This is something we don't get too much of in the albums we review, especially lyric-wise, is the way the imagery really matches the music.
But
that's tasteful.
But this song was just so familiar for me. Two big reasons.
Cello-wise, no.
I'm not saying the cello, but the actual guitar work and the synth work in whole was very reminiscent of the previous 3 tracks. It was a little bit played.
I agree.
Because of that. And it was also, the theme work was basically an amalgamation of the 3 previous songs. This song was really about searching for your lost love.
But
so
for me,
it was searching...
that's the end of Act 1. I didn't mind it for that reason.
It was... To see it as Act 1 might work, but I can't see it as Act 1.
I don't know, for me it's like, if that were at the beginning, it would be more of an overture for the coming tracks, but because it's after them, it felt like a repetition.
Act 1 as a whole should not be an overture. I mean, track 1 was an overture in many ways. The track 2, 3, and 4, I admit, has a similarity in their approach, in the soft acoustic intro, but they all do subtly different things. And again, that's what I want to go back to. This is an exercise in subtlety and reservation, and I kind of appreciate that. I don't need to have flashy things in front of me every single track. And when I look at just 3 tracks in a row, which are unique in their own way, but maybe to a general sense a little bit similar, just in the fact that they have similar instrumentation and a beautiful singer who still sings drastically different melodies, that's not enough weight.
I don't know. I didn't feel
and
they
we
sounded...
get a major pull after this as we go. I mean,
well, yeah, but
as we go into track 5.
Well, I felt that these tracks weren't repetitive to each other. My repetitiveness complaints come later. That the latter half of the album feels very repetitive to the earlier half of the album. So we'll get into that as we go.
I could almost see the first 4 tracks actually working as pseudo movements for one big piece. I can see their connection through and through. I mean, we've had other parts where we can say, like, in other albums, A, B, C go together. Yeah. They work together. But, with all that, I'm not... Since track 1, I haven't really been drawn in the same way. Not as a whole. There's beautiful moments, but I'm not feeling a beautiful song. Or, strike that, I'm feeling a beautiful song. I'm not feeling throughout that complete overture kind of a feeling, that completeness through it.
With these tracks,
I personally appreciate the reservation. Frankly, I think with the theme of sadness, I don't need that kind of punch. I feel like punch.
Well, that's the whole thing.
Hook. These are things that I just don't need at the moment. I want to stew.
That's the problem with sadness. Yeah, punch is hard to do.
Yeah,
It's not.
They don't work.
It's not a high emotion. We went to an emotion. We've had several emotional
in most
things.
of these cases, it's coming from a beaten perspective.
Oh yeah, this is definitely.
This isn't anger. This isn't high love. This isn't.
This
passion.
is from a defeated perspective.
Yes, this isn't even fear. It's very reflective.
This to me, it rings paramount in terms of composition without being necessarily dynamic, and I love that. It's almost an exercise in reservation. I gotta put it out there, at least as the track. Granted, if the thing was like this as a whole, then yeah, maybe I would be a little bit bored. But there are these moments that strike out, keep me engaged. So, with that said, I think I want to go into Alvar.
Okay, so go into Alvar.
Medieval.
Yeah. We all agree.
I stole that one.
Yes, you stole it from me.
Sense.
It's not even classic or classical. It is not old timey, but it is.
No, it is
Arthurian.
It feels like it was played in medieval court. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the whole thing. It's not on the streets. This is court music, if anything.
Oh no, I would agree that I think it would be on the streets. Actually, this is secular to me. This is very much the troubadour to his lover and such.
Yeah, I could see that.
I mean, in that vein, at least. It is acoustic guitar. It's got that similarity to the previous tracks, but it gradually adds tension. And it's that tension that we haven't really gotten in the previous tracks, and I think that's maybe more what was lacking, that you feels lacking in the previous tracks, but it makes up for it here, in my opinion. The tension is accompanied by this really tinny effect, sort of a little bendy effect added on the guitar. It might even be like another instrument there, like a mandolin or something, but it has this...
That is paired with the deep pianos, the
that's
lower
the
register piano.
That's
work.
what really pulled me into this song. Is these? I mean, I love lower register piano work on any song, but for this one especially, it really just kind of tied it together.
For me, it was the bend actually, because there's a little bit of electronic, a little bit of a reverb effect on that bend that made it seem very otherworldly. For that reason, and also, yet it also rang of post rock a little bit. So you get this post rock thing thrown in with the medieval effect. I'm seeing a new fusion at the moment. Something I don't see in music all the time.
And what's
great, foreign ambience.
It's a very light touch that creates this tension. It's a very simplistic to some extent.
Yeah.
In its complexity, it's very simplistic and light and very, very well used.
No, much of this melody was also in a round. Also, it didn't fluctuate too much. It did here and there.
It did a great working in the lyrical and vocal theme work, which was short term.
Yes.
And summer. This was the summer love. Which is why their tension builds throughout the song. It comes to a culmination at the beginning of winter. And that was a major theme. This was a very short term,
That's
not
very
flaring,
you
but deep. And I love... It starts with the opening lines. I mean, these were just beautiful lines. I felt it come, a blade of autumn alive, the amber shape of sunset dance on the wall.
Oh, God, these lyrics are gorgeous.
They really... That's one of the best parts of this album. While the lyrics are at times nonsensical and simplistic, I'm using nonsensical in a very good way. It's supposed to be somewhat opaque. It's supposed to just be
ambiguous.
Yeah, ambiguous and evocative.
Yeah,
It's
but I can't go with
evocative.
simplistic though, because some of this stuff. I mean,
No, some of the lines are very simplistic. They come later, and they're beautiful for it.
simplistic in what way though? I think that's what. How do you mean simplistic?
Noun-
Because we've used it in
Language.
in a
Simplistic
variety of ways.
language.
Purely grammatical in subject, verb, object. But being so simplistic, being 3 words or 4 words, cut to the bone.
I mean, I guess in terms of its brevity, maybe brevity is what you're looking for, because that's one way of seeing simplisticness. But there's some lines here which I mean I don't want to cut too much ahead myself, but say for instance, take a line from the next track from Thea, where you get a line like, tender torn sundown on isthmus, it's all for you, oh hungry moon. This is kind of stuff that you'd have to be in like doctorate level creative writing to come up with this stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
we talked about it in Joe. One of the truly chilling...
syllabolic work going on. That's not simplistic.
But look at one of the most pointed lines in the whole album in Joe that you and I both love. Oh, life figures on. That is just a pointed, simple statement.
It's simple, even though I don't see the average person coming up with that kind of
Simple does
phrase.
not mean unintelligent or naive or anything like that. I'm saying simple in that it does not waste syllables.
And it's approachable.
There's no
and
verbose
understandable.
nature to it. It is, yes, it is.
Not wordy.
All right, I'm starting to see what you're talking about.
Simple.
I guess, I mean, it's tough because lyrics are one thing. I really have to struggle to find the lyrics that really are verbose, unless you're actually talking about, like, rap or something where they're just going to go on and on and on and on. Then you could possibly get pretty verbose. But in a melody, in any melody, you're kind of restricted. In which case, your risk is not running verbose. Your risk is losing meaning and losing the artistic emphasis of your use of syllables, your use of alliteration, your use of these things. You might end up just forgetting about it as you try to cram it in your melody. These are the risks you run. I don't think verbose is a huge risk, which is why I see this as kind of erroneous point, but I'll take it because it is concise, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
I'll leave it at
better.
that.
Concise is better than simplistic.
All right.
That's a more appropriate word.
All right. Well, you're welcome.
Thank you. I was trying to figure that one out. Anyway, back to
considering-
Alvar.
Yes.
There was one big aspect I totally loved: the fade out.
Oh.
The fade out was gorgeous.
As in the section B, this gets very, very soft, but then it grows again. It gets atmospheric, and then it starts to fade out again. Again, it kind of returns to the progression, a nice within song arc, similar to the way Joe had. Also overlaying herself again, this time using her voice as a very strange effect. Did anyone catch that? That
The
sort
doubling.
of waning,
It's
doubling. It wasn't a lyric necessarily
It was
at all.
waxing and waning, doubling with herself.
Yes, and that also even happens within the guitar bends. The dissonances start to
Yeah.
phase in and out, just away from the tone, just
Yeah,
the
it
other
was the
direction
opposite
of
of
the tone.
harmony.
Yeah, but specifically the effect that was used on her voice, it almost felt like a gust of wind, kind of. It's a very weird effect, but that's what entered the fade out right there. It was using that effect which made it so unique to me.
And I'm going to bring this point up now because it's an excellent part for me to make this argument. How is this not ambient? With everything
Because-
we're
all right,
talking...
okay.
No. Wait. Let me make my point. With everything we're talking
waiting.
about, how she's using the music to create this theme work. They're using the lyrics to create this theme work. In every single song. And how so
Hold
much
on.
of the music is designed to get the message across instead of just being music.
I will tell you, because as far as categorization of music is concerned, ambient has kind of a strict meaning, and if we start flexing that term to be as broad as you mean it, then it will have no meaning anymore. That is specifically the reason why. Ambient is kind of straightforward. It's a sound, almost a drone, which wanes a little bit, but it really is steady. Really steady. As far as this is concerned, the strings, yes, there might be moments where the strings may be a little bit more steady than other times, but there's too much comping going on that it fluctuates. It fluctuates beyond, I think, the credit that you're giving it.
I still disagree.
You may,
I still disagree.
but I'm telling you, as far as categorization goes, ambient, I just can't be that flexible with the term.
Matt,
It's been very quiet. You have to ring on.
Are you going to be on any of our sides yet?
No, I think you're both wrong. The thing about this album for me is that I don't know if it's because it's so overwhelmingly sad. I mean, clearly, obviously, I'm an emotion guy and I get really attached to emotion, but I don't know. Most of these songs, I didn't pick up on all the lyrics. I felt very Steve, if you will. The lyrics didn't really get to me. I didn't really hear them through the music. The music was beautiful, but by the fifth beautiful track, I'm tired of saying the same descriptor.
I know, well,
and I'm running out of other things to say.
I'm glad that at least we're arguing and disagreeing for once. I just want to put that out there before we really get into this. But it's funny that you take this term because I feel like just with some of the lyrics that John's read here, it shocks me that you could say that about the lyrics. I mean, this is some of the greatest poetry here.
Yes, true. Very difficult to discern because of the way she uses her inflection at times. Some of the best lines are just hard to hear.
Because he also read the lyrics, which I haven't done.
I heard it on my second listen through.
No, I'll agree with that. I'll agree. Some of the lyrics are hard to hear because, after all, there's a lot of reverb on her voice.
And
that is true.
It's not even no reverb. Her inflection just draws out some syllables that it's just hard to understand what she's saying.
At this point in the record,
I'm okay with it though because again, if you're not looking at lyrics, then you can only focus on melody, and I have no problem with that in this particular case.
There's nothing wrong with the melodies per se, but nothing. I don't feel her emotion. I understand it.
It's becoming a very abstract review, in case you haven't noticed.
I understand her emotion. I know what she's saying to a point, and I'm getting it, but I'm not personally feeling it.
You're not immersing yourself in it.
Correct.
And this is where I'm going to throw another term here, which I have not thrown in. There's a huge impressionist theme going on here. I mean, as a theme or as a descriptor, perhaps even as a genre that we haven't previously described it to.
That's perfect. That's probably even better than ambient. Impressionistic. We're meeting in the middle ground here.
All right,
that is a great way to describe it.
Okay, all right. No, I will buy. That's perfect. That is perfect.
Agree.
That's our genre.
Is perfect. All right, just a little backstory on impressionism here. I mean, this is the kind of thing that was started out. You might know like Debussy's Clair de Lune, which is probably the most popular example of classical impressionism out there. Unfortunately, people know it through the Twilight soundtrack, but neither here nor there. Impressionism is a word that was attributed to Debussy's work. He actually didn't like it himself because, of course, every artist wants to say that, well, I can't be put in a box.
Yeah, of course.
But it attributed to him for good reason, for the same exact reason of some of the painters that were around at the time, is it would just give you this impression of a particular emotion, an idea. Whereas, yes, you're not really supposed to kind of be completely immersed. Like, let's go back to Blue October here. Like, the way in which you were really drawn into the song Bleed Out, right?
Yes.
You were drawn in because of the lyrics, the way he sang it, and almost, like, that stuff, it was on the nose.
Yeah.
For me, too on the nose. For me, too on the nose and too pop for me to really get into it. But that's the difference between your emotionality and my emotionality is this is the stuff that really does grip me. I like the ambiguity that goes with impressionism. That it does vary from person to person, and it kind of leaves you with just, this is what's going on in the music, regardless of what's going on in your mind. In other words, you can't attribute anything.
At the end of the day, you just kind of go, huh, didn't see that before. That's what it does. That's probably the most...
That's such a shallow way to...
No, it's the most blue-collar way to really do it, but...
It is, all right.
It's like, that's the culmination. That's the blue-collar culmination of it. Okay.
That's mighty pretty, I tell you.
No, that's...
Let's
Okay.
move forward to
I get
Thea.
what
All
you're
right.
saying. I get it.
Now here's
So
the part of the
Thea-
album I'm falling in love with.
So Thea is the first song where I really kind of got pulled in, and I don't know if it's because it's cliche or too on the nose or whatever it is, but this song was very engaging from the get-go.
beat.
It
Okay.
honestly did, and you
Forget
pointed
you.
out the marching beat before I did.
Forget you. I love the fact that comparatively, this was speeding down the highway.
Yeah.
Comparatively.
Oh, comparatively, sure. Don't get me wrong. This is one of my favorite tracks. It's just my reason for you pointing this out isn't because of this track. You have a good reason to point it out in this track. It's just because the idea that this should be the one thing that separates it on this album.
But the reason why that faster tempo was important was because it starts with a very simple beat and undergoes an immense transformation, retransformation, re-retransformation of such a simple, steady... This was a 4/4 measure. This was basic style
Yeah, there's nothing
music.
fancy rhythmically going on here.
It's
footsteps. It starts out as these soft footsteps, which sounds like almost like a little shaker going
It's
along with it.
amazing what
And
happens
then,
to it.
and then we gradually get a little bit louder for the first verse. Maybe even the first chorus, we stay at that volume. And then verse 2, we get the full-on bass combined with footsteps. Just this very steady boom, boom, boom. It's like a heartbeat almost, if a heartbeat didn't actually go boom, boom. But it is engaging. It is gripping. Just the fact, yes, comparatively, that we have a strong bass. It even timbre-wise, it's a very clever, very tasteful follow-up to the previous usage of upright bass.
Well, and also...
I think it's just not different enough. If it was too different, if it was like full-on trance beat, then I'd be like, good God, this does not belong.
Right.
But it's not different enough. Again, subtlety and reservation at work, just the right
And this
variant.
is the first time on the whole record where they really sound electronic in their roots on this
even
song.
80s almost.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it did have definitely that... We said it had that kind of pop 80s electronic sound.
Yeah.
Well, it did a good job of doing what it wanted to do and what it wanted to do, in my opinion. Because this one was... This one I took two ways. First, I thought there was more of a... separated from the one I desired. But this one was really culminated to me in a kind of a love-hate relationship. In a damaging love. In bad love. To some extent. And
It's perhaps why it sounded the most...
dissident?
I was going to even go further with, like... It had anger in it.
Yep. It had anger in the
It was
words.
aggressive. It was
There
very
you go.
aggressive.
That was good.
Either that or this... aggressive in the... Maybe this is the moment... Like, we've had a lot of stewing going on.
Yeah.
We know that this album is
This
a lot
is
about stewing.
This is a lash out.
This is either a lash out or this is the moment where you're stewing back and forth, pacing back and forth like
Do I
Jack
take him up-
Nicholson
Yeah.
in the hallway of the Shining building.
Yeah.
It's like
Well-
this is when you're getting ready to snap, but you don't because there's something about this track. It's like it's always trying to climax and doesn't quite do it.
That's because of the candor in its lyrics and the candor in its vocals.
Yes.
Wanted you so bad, I feel like I'm caught without air. Wanted you gone, wanted you there. Candor. Simple.
Well, here's the thing. This album, it's too introverted to climax. It's too introverted to really lash out in any way. So that simplicity, it's just... You're gonna get that. You're not gonna... It's not gonna bring to the full-on... You almost feel, just because of the beat, you almost feel like you're expecting some kind of super full-on trance chorus kind of thing.
Maybe,
You're
yeah.
not gonna get that.
We also said, too, that the chorus of this song, and even especially the pre-chorus, felt very much pop electronic. It had that kind of...
There's energy. There's
Yeah.
a lot
There's
of energy that was
There's very
missing
much energy.
in the other songs, because the other songs were sad. This is
It's
anger depression.
This is aggressive. It's more aggressive than the other
Aggressive,
tracks.
It's
aggressive sadness.
aggressive at the same kind of reserved, passionate that's almost exotic. I know we're throwing a lot of words here, but this is
We're using a lot of words here.
when a lot of them don't always coincide. But this is a really tough album to describe because, like I said, I think that's why impressionism is probably going to be one of the best words we can sum it up as.
Yeah.
It's
Well, no,
going
it's
to be very
It's a very easy album to describe. It's a very hard album to describe.
yeah.
at
Well,
length.
in layman's terms, sad.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we could have had a
Sad.
5-second review and just said, this is a sad album with lots of stuff.
But
Now,
that
this is
doesn't
definitely a thing-
scratch the surface.
No, of course
It's
not.
Paper Chase. We could say Paper Chase was angry. doesn't describe anything of the album.
Yet it's a very descriptive word for the album.
Yes, we're running into this same issue.
Okay,
All right,
so
the thing is, it packs a punch while at the same time packing a non-punch.
Yeah.
You almost feel like you wanted more. Each time that bass, those footsteps get louder, I want to explode. Even though it does almost explode, but it doesn't quite. It doesn't quite. But again, it's almost fascinating to witness.
It is.
But I could easily see another reviewer could write this and say, you're waiting for the moment that never happens.
Yeah.
I could, reviewers,
definitely
critics love to use that language, and I could see it. I just,
And that's why the next track was kind of mind-boggling to me, as opposed to, where it went. So Simone is track 7, and for one, this was way too similar to me to Annabelle. In tone, in presentation, I'm not done. But also, it was just such a strange follow-up to Thea, because Thea just went in this one direction, and then going back into Simone, it felt almost like track 6 never happened.
Again, reservation.
And
also...
Simone was it was Annabelle. It really was, but it was so much deeper, so much darker.
Yes, this takes it in a more mature direction. I mean, even just in the way she says certain phrases, like when we're alone, this is a perfect example of that chord lyric marriage that perhaps is a little bit lacking in Annabelle, to the point where I saw a disconnect there. Yes, it was in her inflection, the way she said Annabelle was very simple, but you get into the lyrics, and that's the kind of situation where the lyrics, you can't hear them. You almost have trouble because it's your focus inflection. Here, there's punctuation.
Yeah.
That's, I think, that subtle difference that makes it more engaging of a track to me.
I guess, and I can see that, and I suppose that, I don't know, I guess for me it's just the whole beginning half of Simone just kind of felt too similar to a different song. I kept going, I've heard this before, I heard this somewhere before. But then the punctuations come in that kind of set it apart, and I do see that.
I definitely agree with that. It was not divergent enough from Annabelle for me to really say, why didn't I just get this in Annabelle? Why didn't I get
I did like the composition work better in this than I did in Annabelle.
I feel like with the song...
This had a much more fluid, layered, circular manner of composition, which I was engaged in.
And with all that, it did an excellent job of actually getting across this song's theme, which was the other man. This is wrong love. To some extent, this is the gritty mistress type of scenario where you should be apart, but you can't. You're hurting others with this love.
And with this song, though, at this point, though, I was like, it's so similar to Annabelle that I was like, but this is better than Annabelle? I feel like Annabelle was not necessary once we had this track, because... I
add a pull here. It's not that similar. If anything, maybe it's more similar to the next couple tracks than it is to Annabelle. But again, you're lumping 2 to 4 too similarly to me. I mean, maybe you just needed to listen to it more times.
No, I'm not. I'm only comparing this to Annabelle.
But I don't get it. Can you point out specific phrasings that are similar?
We don't have your training to actually say
do that. It's just, to me, I just felt like I'd heard it before.
In general, same tone. To me, that just says it belongs on the same album.
Steve, you gotta concede this. We both felt the exact same way about it. There is that. And we both came to the conclusion separately. It's not like one of us is just talking and making stuff up. We both feel that.
Alright, I'll pull a you. I'll disagree, and we'll leave it at that.
I'm sure there are differences we just can't appreciate, but it just, for us, it's very much a rehash. To some extent.
Rehash is such a strong
It feels distinct, but very samey.
And I'll tell you this.
In
terms of similarity to other stuff that's not Goldfrapp, there's some influences here, which I very much so see. So not every single track here is something cutting edge. And has cutting edge moments, though. Kate Bush, for one, was one of her influences. Very more moderately popular female pop singer. Which did, yes, pop music, but in a little bit more of a serious... introverted manner, one could say. And she did that throughout the 70s and 80s. So, yes, it harkens back to things. Even if you don't hear it within the same album that she's referencing herself, she may be referencing other artists. There are similarities in phrasing. So not every single song is going to bombard you with, holy crap, this is new.
Right.
So yes, but at the same time, she does it in a new, original way. I can't beat up on it. It's still better than the vast majority of pop that I hear, and I do stress that this is almost dream pop. Like, there is still a pop element here, regardless of this composition. You still find the verse and chorus. It's just, but the way she plays around with it, to me, is brilliant.
Again, I never said though that it was poor quality or not
All right,
well
just
made.
that there's a similarity in the album.
Yes.
All right, fine.
That's all I'm saying.
Well, let's see how the end
So
end
track
tracks stack
8,
up with
Stranger. This song is one of those songs that we all agreed was kind of very easy to predict. It had a very kind of Western vibe, even more so than what was the other one that you said was Drew. This really, with the whistling and this kind of howling, wandering feel, it kind of felt
I'll admit
more
this.
Western.
I'll admit this. This is a track where I felt did not have the same marriage of lyrics and chord progression or general tone of the melody being stated. And this comes with the theme that John is about to tell you.
I will ask one question first. I love the themes on this album. Let me
Themes
just
are
aside.
beautiful.
The themes are great conceptually. I love the ideas that they're trying to get across, and for the most part, in my opinion, succeeding. But here's my question. What did you think the whistle was?
That's
Describe
my
it emotionally.
problem, though. I
No,
didn't
no, no,
have
no, no,
one.
no, no. I'm just asking you what you felt the emotional context of the whistle was.
All right. Emotion doesn't even come first because it's hard to hear that whistle without hearing that same Western thing that you pointed out earlier.
So describe the whistle to me, either of you.
What it meant, what it represented.
I don't know. I barely remember it.
Okay, yeah. What, Steve? What did it represent?
Is this without the theme that you
Yeah.
were yet to?
Yeah.
Because without that, I an emotion, a specific emotion. to
No,
go
just
along with
anything.
this.
Describe it to me, because this is very important. And before Steve doesn't seem he can get it right off the bat. Not that I'm trying to look for anything, but I'm just wondering
He's
because
looking for
I
something.
saw
He's definitely looking.
I saw a couple things associated with that. And while the song was very predictable, that whistle spoke to me. It created. I felt passé to start with, but as it went along, it felt hollow, purposely hollow. Purposely dissident to the rest of it. Purposely almost not dangerous, just fearful. And the reason for that is this song, while predictable, had an element of a love of death. A love of that taste of danger that you get when just going out there and throwing yourself onto someone. That kind of, I want to be hurt, just to feel kind of a context that they're working in here.
I'm waiting for you to get to death.
I said death already. There was that desire for the danger of the unknown, the desire for the taste of death.
All right.
But we
And
always,
I mean, I agree based on the lyrics that I saw. And I do agree that the melody, yes, Matt, I'll kowtow to you. Matt, the melodies in this were predictable. These were definitely not standoutish in any way, because at least, we're coming from different perspectives here. Before I reference Kate Bush, which is more of an abstract reference, but this is a blatant reference to a lot of cinema tracks from the 50s and 60s.
But
I mean, not just westerns, but a lot of love stories tended to use this. So yes, it's not fresh in that way. It's hard for me to feel something.
But
really...
even towards the end of the track, we all agreed that we were humming along, not even knowing where the track was going in the first listen, because it was so predictable.
This didn't necessarily progress in the same way.
Yeah.
This did repeat the same
Yeah.
chorus, and it didn't really recompose it in any manner to speak of. It's still an enjoyable track, but yes, this is one of the weaker ones for its predictability.
Well, that's like when I talk about stuff that I
Even
like.
that whistle, you know what else it reminded me of? Kill Bill.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
Throw
where the
that out there.
cinematicness came from.
Yeah, that's the cinema quality.
If cinematicness
Frankly,
is
it's
a
hard
word.
for me to even separate the cinema qualities with this track.
No, it has a very cinematic
I
quality.
was
I'll
hoping
agree.
you were going to say about the cinema.
Oh,
That's what I was trying to get out of you. You didn't want to commit.
All right.
And Kill Bill is an excellent reference, but then again, remember who does the whistling? Kind of a dangerous person?
Not offhand.
The woman.
The lead character.
The lead character does the
Uma
whistling.
Thurman.
Oh,
And
that's
she
right.
kills
Yeah, I remember that.
everybody.
Typical Quentin Tarantino shot. They pull away from a scene that's not focused on her, straight to her, where she appears to be whistling the track you've been hearing for the previous minute.
As she cuts people's heads off.
Tarantino thing.
It really does. Yes, it's a little passe. Kind of is appropriate in this case. It's in your face, but it does it.
Well, I love Kill Bill, but yes, even Tarantino can have his passe moments.
Oh,
Quite
yes,
a
he can.
bit. Even passe for Quentin Tarantino.
Anyway, moving on to the next track, Laurel. So this one I think is where you really get to see, really get to see the dynamics of her voice and the way she can sing.
Or not just the voice, but I think the full-on composition and everything else. This one was... Well, just to start off at the beginning, this is a lot softer. This is a solo piano, just punctuating solo piano, steady against... considering you do get that earlier here, but this time it seems to be a lot more focus on it. The piano never flourishes. It never does anything fancy. It's always just used almost... It is the rhythm.
Yeah.
And the fact that you get to throw in chords with that rhythm is what makes the piano such an awesome instrument. And the melodies, yes, the most dynamic. They'd been layering incredible... kind of going back to that 70s croonerism now, like Kate Bush-oriented stuff. And then, toward the end, I think is well, from middle to end straight, we start layering one instrument after the other. The vibraphone starts to join in, too,
It's that late,
with the punctuation.
That late deep that we got in previous work.
And then on top of that...
depth.
On top of that, an electric keyboard, very almost jazzy a little bit, just a smidgen.
I guess
Not in
really
style,
hear
but not
it.
in style, but in tone.
Oh, all right. I guess I can see.
And then
that.
on top of that, this guitar strumming, which the three of those working together was a work of layering composition masterpiece. It's a very high moment for this end of the album for me.
I mean, there's no denying the skill of this band for sure. That's not even a question.
Not a band, it's composition and vocals. I mean, this is
the duo then. A band, strong word, but their talent can't be denied, regardless of liking, disliking, or repetitive, not repetitive. There's a talent here that cannot be denied, and this song really shows it.
Yeah, and I also want to go into wait, I think that's the next track. So we might as well close this off.
Yeah, we can wrap up.
Wait a minute.
What?
Oh yeah, sorry, John hasn't gone through his theme.
I have to explain how the music parallels the theme.
That's what he does.
Yes, thank you for making it obvious and trite now. Good job.
That's what Steve does.
No, yeah.
That's his job on the podcast.
I forgot about that.
He's belittling us for the things we do.
Ah, yes.
You discovered that, huh?
Yeah.
Shoot.
That late depth with the, like, trilly piano, to some extent. The trilly jazzy piano.
That was the keyboard, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, only time I noticed electric keyboard in this album.
This song spoke of the fear of never being able to replace love. And quite blatantly, there's some lyrical work of prostitution. Reaching in the wallet, trying to use money to replace it. It isn't, it isn't brash or coarse or anything like that. It's actually very well done. But I really love the line, fear is a fog rolling in and around. It really personifies that fear of never being able to find something again. To find that person again. Or a person again.
Or as Christopher Titus has said many a time, look back. Maybe that's the best you're ever going to do. You know? And it's that idea that...
Oh, God.
It's that idea that you can't do better than what you have.
It's not you can't be loved. You can't be loved again.
Yeah. It's not finding again what you want.
Yeah. And it did a great job of building the depth with that, I want to say even shallow keyboard. The kind of like...
Shallow? I can't
shallow,
go that
but
far.
like... Not deep. It's not a deep... It's not a fully expanded keyboard. But it is...
No, this is not expanded in the way that... Like, no instrument here is taking the forefront. They're working together. And in that way,
blending.
I think that's purposeless to really hone in on an instrument and scrutinize it in that regard when
Well, I'm
it's
saying
when it's
it's-
meant to be used with the others. In this
But
context,
it's like a slight light high being interspersed in that depths.
Yeah, but
That's
that
what
was
I'm
the
trying to-
whole album. Is these slight light highs within the depth of the record? Like, I mean,
Well, yeah, that's a great way to sum it up.
yeah. And
Good job.
Thanks. And the last track really shows that. As far as wrapping up the sentiments of the record, and it's the first track where you actually get this kind of glimpse of hope, but not without its own depressing meter.
Yeah, this one is actually probably it's fighting with Thea for the uptaking, energizing kind of feeling.
I
the
thought
higher
Thea
tempo.
was way more energizing, but
No,
this
this
one
was hopeful. This was really nice.
this did have a pang of hope at the very end of the album. After,
I mean, too bad it's about somebody that's already dead.
yeah,
Just gotta throw that out there. This one is about the sort of "I'll love you in the next life."
But honestly, as far as conclusions go, if you're going to write a song about something very final, death is pretty final.
I mean, okay,
Unless it's the zombie
I
apocalypse.
love
This
the
requires
chorus.
lyrics.
I love the chorus. Our shadows reframed memories. We want only to live, only to love and breathe again.
I stole that. I was gonna write that down because it was my favorite line of the goddamn album.
That, honestly, my favorite lines are in the first track and last track.
Yeah, no, I agree. Even just your deep-seeing eyes, ancient stars, the way in which that's phrased with her melody again. We're back to marriage here. These, you can't... Wow, I want to say you can't write this stuff, but apparently you can. Apparently.
It was an excellent outro.
Don't be so angry because someone else wrote it and you didn't. Don't be jealous.
Well, hey, a little bit of jealousy there. But hey,
I think my biggest thing about this record, and it shows here on 10, is that the skeleton of the record were the strongest moments for me. The beginning, the middle, and the end were the strongest tracks to me.
Alright.
Sort of like a 1-5-10.
Yeah, actually. Well, yeah, no, Thea was 6, but yeah, essentially.
That, okay, well, they're just saying that the album itself ebbs and flows.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not a terrible thing, actually.
We've, I mean, definitely braided for less.
Yeah.
This ebbs and flows more so than I think a good deal of our arc stuff, to be honest.
Yeah.
You're looking, the strongest gap you're really looking at is that 3-song general, and I say that loosely, general sameness. Yes, front to back, I'll say that straight up, there is a solid theme. I can't say any less than theme. I can't say boring. I can't say any other things that I know would probably follow up an album like this. But it definitely fluctuates, and in the subtle ways that it does, I appreciate that. In the end, kind of more, just in its
Right.
earnesty. So, who's gonna start?
You might as well, since you're already going.
Well, as I said, appreciate it for the earnesty, and I understand that there's other stuff out there that is similar to this, but I'm gonna call it out in these. I don't think it has as good vocal work as Alison Goldfrapp. I don't think they have anywhere near as good melodies, even if they are more memorable melodies. I'm going to say that. These are melodies that only pieces of, like the pre-chorus, for instance, is stuck in my head right now. The run, you better run for your life, that's stuck in my head. I can't get that out. So that's memorable. Pieces of these melodies are memorable, not the whole thing.
Yeah.
The whole thing, they're too difficult. They're too complicated to really memorize, unless you sit down with this album for a while and ingrain it, which I frankly plan to. This is a going-back album for me. I'm curious to see what else it can give me, and I want to really milk the intricate parts of composition that I love. Its holes are, yes, in front to back listenability. I'm going to agree with you there, Matt. In 1 to 10, yes, this is a little bit tough. It's a little bit tough to get through, but I don't think any more so than a previous example of ours, Boards of Canada. Boards of Canada, you were the first one to say that Tomorrow's Harvest, episode 54, we reviewed this ambient album. This was straight up ambient with techno influence. Actually,
Yeah.
a lot of techno.
It wasn't
comes
as
into
straight
that.
up ambient.
But it was
as I thought
very
might be.
dark, and I think it also had very much the sameness as this did. But it had a theme.
Right.
That was the reason. The reason was that album had a very post-apocalyptic thing going on. It was very desolate. It was very it also focused on the whole futurist thing, but at the same time, it was a future from bygone past. It was that 1970s era, early electronic phase.
There was also the aspect of its orientation on the idea of communication.
Yes, communication. They would have little sub-themes in here and there, but at the same time, musically speaking, just the overall tone would be kind of one thing. Yes, I feel cold, electronic, and desolate,
Right.
and that makes that album had quite a few tracks on it. It made it so that when you got to the end, the overall listenability, regardless of how much you're immersed into the world, can be tough. It can be a bit of a drain on you, because I'm like, all right, I kind of got it. I got the gist. And this album only suffers in that slightly. Ever so slightly, but less. Less, in my opinion, just because it's a shorter album. 10 tracks, and there's a more definable story. The story is more definable than the that's kind of the thing with Boards of Canada. And don't get me wrong, I loved that album, Tomorrow's Harvest. It's just, this to me is a little bit more, first of all, it's beautiful. That makes it more easy listening to me, straight up. I'm going to tell you straight up, this is above a 4 for me. But I can't bring it to, 4.5 for those objective reasons. I realize that I'm gonna have to sacrifice some subjectivity here. This is 4.25. I'm leaving it there. It's too beautiful. Even the moments in which it sags in terms of, they're relative. If they were songs by themselves, they would still be incredible. But it's just the fact that you hear them after a song that is so beautiful, so intricate, then it's like, oh, okay, that was a little bit of a letdown. It's inevitable. It's just inevitable. But this is a beautiful album. 4.25.
You're right, it is beautiful. Her voice is beautiful, it's well composed. But going back to Boards, yes, there was a huge connection in theme. Yes, there was multi-layers to the theme. And I'm getting the same thing here. In fact, I mean, I was pointing this stuff out left, right, center as we're listening to it. It was there for me. I saw it. But Boards, I can tell the difference of the songs. And I'm not saying I will not be able to hear, oh, I think it's true, so on and so forth. But for me, while yes, they may have been more the same moment by moment, maybe, I don't know, I can tell the difference between all those songs. These songs, there are parts that really just blend together a little bit too much. I don't have, it's more prevalent in the beginning, but I don't have that ability to say this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, the way I have with so many other albums. And that is positive and negative. It creates a unified product, but it's hard to take a song and love that song. You end up, like you say, picking out moments. It's beautiful moments. There are some great... Okay.
I want to interrupt just to say that this is for you. This is for you in your review, because I disagree. I think these songs are... Some of them, and most of them on this album, are beautiful front to back. I wouldn't splice them. I really wouldn't.
Okay.
Right, but you felt that way about stuff that we blatantly disagreed as well. I mean, it happens.
Right, yeah.
Some of these songs are beautiful front to back, but I don't see it in the beginning the same way you do. I just don't. I have issues. It's gorgeous. As a whole, I mean, we always say we put so much work on theme work. There's a reason. This is amazing thematically. The arc is astounding to do something like this on such a macro scale of an album. It's hard to do. Usually you would want to see about the progression of a specific storyline. Instead, we're getting snapshots all within one basic idea, and that is love is depressing. That's what it boils down to. Every little aspect here is about the depression associated with love, which is very specific and very hard to do. But we're going to go back to my original argument that I was going to save, and you brought up anyway. It's Requiem for a Dream. This is something, and I liked Requiem, but it's one of those movies that you watch once and you're done. You never have to see it again. This is something that I think everybody should hear once. but very few people would want to go back to this again for subject matter and for its overall hook. You said the melody as a whole is a hook, but most people can't hear that.
But
and
they would go back to it for mood.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Not everybody wants to feel this sad. That's a big thing. Content is going to be a problem to reach the masses. Now, I'm not detracting because of content. I'm not going to, because I love the idea. But that's going to be a hard just for other people to hear.
I think it's a shame that more people can't get in touch with their inner sadness. But actually, it releases you very, very cathartically.
It's a problem. It really is a problem to do 45 minutes of depression. I could hear it as snippets as being something when you're in a funk, but to hear that's borderline emo to some extent.
I might
and I'm using it as a derogatory term.
My review,
but
I have a point with that.
It's going to be hard for the average person to go back to this. I'm not going to decrease it because of that, but I'm saying that it's hard to go back to this purely because of what it's trying to emote, and that's a problem. But I'm not. I'm siding with Steve on this. This is a 4 1/4. I'm going to put it up there. Artistically, It's a 4 1/4.
I respect your super objectivity.
The art is what makes it great, but I don't think on a musical track by track level, it's going to be. It's greater than some of its parts. That's what I'm going to end it with. That's the best way to put it. It's greater than the sum of its parts.
I did not think you were going to go up.
No, this is... I love theme, and I love story, and I love all that aspect. And it had great lyrics, great poetry. And, well, didn't like the range, but the vocals were beautiful. I mean, I'm saying all these complimentary things. How can I go less?
I'll tell you straight up, this is some moments, aspects of this music, one including vocal quality, are going to be brought back at my end of year review, provided between now and the end of the year I don't hear better vocals, because so far this is tops.
Okay, for me, I don't know.
I'm
sorry,
really hoping and expecting you to
not
really
go last.
to go low. I'm really expecting you to go low.
So here's my biggest problem with this record for me is the things that you've said, Steve, that you feel, I get and understand. I'm not saying you're wrong because I can't. Because we're not all going to hear the same thing the same way, obviously.
This is going to go a Blue October direction, I believe.
But it really... So, the thing is with this is, again, when I listened to this the first time, I will admit I felt more the second time I listened to it. I did get a better, closer listen, and I did find more that I liked about it than on the first listen. The first listen, it was a 3 to me. Because I was bored. I just was not engaged. I was not interested. It felt unapproachable the first time I heard it. The second time I heard it, I found more in it. There are moments that I like. But again, for me, the big tracks that stand out are 1, 6, and 10. The rest of the tracks, I felt like they were interchangeable. I know they're not, to some people. And I have to agree with John. An album this depressing, from start to finish, is hard to approach. Yes, I agree with you, though, what you said, that people could stand to engage this sadness more often. However, not many people are going to engage this sadness all the time and listen to this album constantly. I just don't think you can with an album like this, especially if people are getting out of it what you're getting out of it.
No, I agree with that.
I think it's too much. Whereas with something like the Blue October album, which I connected to, the songs that made me cry were balanced by the songs on that album that I really grooved to and enjoyed and made me feel good. And that was a balance of emotion that I could handle. Whereas in this, on the first listen, I didn't really catch it, and on the second listen, it was just kind of too much.
I'll even interrupt to say, I'm not sure whether I should count that as subjective or objective. I mean, yes, everyone, you do have to expect when people are going to push play.
Yeah.
Maybe that should be a factor. At the same time, I don't think that should be something to attack the art.
Oh no, and I wouldn't.
Content. Let me put this out there. If I was more on
it is
content,
rated. Yeah,
this would be under a 4 definitely for me. If I was really factoring in content, it's such a bleak idea that it's hard
But see,
That's the
no,
whole
I
thing.
understand.
But see, I'm not factoring that in.
No, I just want to. This is interesting. I want to discuss that because when you say bleak, I mean, then it's a subjective thing. Like desolation, going back to the Boards of Canada thing, isn't desolation a bleak topic? I know tons of people who wouldn't want to immerse themselves into desolation. In which case, by that standard, that was overrated. Not overrated, but literally, we overrated it. Or you did. I don't know.
Okay. The thing is, for me...
It's logic. I'm following logic.
Let me finish my wrap up, because this album review actually ran way longer than I thought it would.
This is what we do.
And so... But anyway, and I actually have an idea for a very short topic we can discuss briefly after this, but we'll get back to that. Again, it's not bad. You can't say this record is bad. And that I get. There's talent, and there are moments...
No one said the B word. All right, we get it.
But I don't connect to it in a way that I've connected with a lot of other music. And maybe it's because, yes, I like the obvious pop. That could be it. That maybe I just need that obvious connection. And that when it's a little more vague, I can't find it. But that's not necessarily true, because there's plenty of Nine Inch Nails music that's been very vague and cryptic that I do get into and attach to. So, I don't know, maybe this is one of those albums that I could listen to a couple more times, and by the end of the year, my rating would change. But as that stands now, it's a 3.5 for me. Because for me, and my rating, and my personal connection, it's not there. I just don't get it. For whatever reason I don't get it, and we could talk that to death, and I really don't want to, because it'll just be an argument and a disagreement, which are good. For me, I just don't get it. And so for me, to me, this seems like something I would play in the background when I'm at a make-out party in college, or if I'm getting stoned with a bunch of friends.
God, that's so impersonal, though.
But that's how I feel about this record. It's not personal to me. I just don't feel that personal connection.
Okay. We've said multiple times, Steve's the musician, I'm the lyricist, Matt's the emote. And I kind of look at myself not as the lyricist, but as the storyteller, the guy looking for the story.
He views himself in many ways.
Yes. And I think that actually this works, that it's appropriate what you're rating it at. Because if you're going to be the guy that we look to for emotions, yeah. No, Steve, Storm, you guys are both right. From the lyrical aspect, from the storyline aspect, I gotta be over a 4. From the musical aspect, you gotta be over a 4. From the emotional aspect, just its content, I would say, yeah.
This is where I'm gonna disagree, though. No, I understand your reasoning right now in terms of like where we stand, but emotionally, I think at this time, this particular case, that's a general rule of thumb.
Yeah.
That's a general rule of thumb as to what we tend to hone in on. But to be honest, I'm not. Believe it or not, this day I'm not really coming from a musical perspective. I'm coming more from an emotional perspective. That hit me even more than the music. But of course, they are integrated with me in a way.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm getting the emotion from the music. But it's to a point where I didn't even get into Chords today. I barely talked about it. I mean, in many ways, it's really just the flow. It's the flow from one moment to the next, and what she was saying, how she was saying it. It's those things that rang together me in such a way that I can only define it as an emotional response. So today, I'm afraid we're not in our elements.
Even still, I feel like for me, maybe it's just that it's too much of one emotion for me. That's why I can't emotionally connect to it.
I could.
Maybe it's an overcharge of that, or it was emotionally stagnant. But I don't even want to say stagnant because that's such a harsh word. It's just the simplest way to put it is I just didn't get it. I didn't connect. Maybe some more listens will change that. And at the end of the year, we'll have something to do. But for me, I want to talk about, we brought up hook a ton of times today. And the thing about hooks in music is that we're talking about it like hook is this definable thing, but it's really not.
Yes and no.
Well, it is and
both.
it's not. The thing about a hook in music is sometimes it's just what hooks you. It's a specific note, a specific lyric, a specific
we've done this several times where like one of us is going to shout out, "Ooh, a hook right there brought me in," and now the two just stare blankly.
We usually use it. A hook's a lot of times a breakdown or a chord progression that captures your attention and takes it up a notch to keep it simple.
In this album's case, for you, Matt, apparently the hook seemed to be the rhythm whenever rhythm was present, which I admit was sparse. Well, rhythm is of course present throughout, but I guess a strong, definable beat, which yes, this album really didn't have.
No.
It had it in really one song, and that was Thea.
Yeah.
I mean, and there were a couple of other moments where, yes, it would build to that. But it's true that was not a major feature. But for you, that was like, oh, wait, hold on, there's something here. But for me, that means nothing. It's almost irrelevant considering the context of the previous
for you, the
stuff.
hook was the melody. You said that several times. The way the melody was constructed on this album is what hooked you in almost every song.
It's when it's like the pointed use of, oh, she just went up to a 9th right there. Oh, she just scrapped the 11th. That's gorgeous.
Whereas the hook for John was the lyrics. Certain lyrics just pulled him in.
The story usually tends to pull me in. That's where.
And that's what I wanted to close with on this podcast, is kind of showing very briefly the dynamics of how hooks can be viewed very differently by each person. And this album really shows that.
A great example for a lyrical hook, and it's in Same Love. Every time the female vocalist, whose name I'm blanking on right now, starts the line, "She keeps me warm," it brings tears to my eyes.
Every single time.
That's a hook.
Yeah.
That's a hook for me. That's that essence of feel, of be part of this, of take yourself into this song.
Whereas for me, a really strong hook was on Automatonic Electronic Harmonic. Every time the spine would start a line and then all three of them would finish it, that hooked me. Because the way they brought in the harmonies at the end of every line really pulled you into that song.
It's funny, usually the term's actually different from the way a lot of bands use the term hook.
Right.
But, a lot of times it's used for, like, chorus things.
Right.
In my case, I guess I kind of join a little bit with that. Like, something that pushes you, unless the verse is particularly engaging, which it has occurred with verses are engaging. Yeah. But, like, in this case, it was the very first track right here, which was why this was a very quick draw-in for me, is, intro. It's like, okay, yes, I admit it's gorgeous. Loved it. Verse, still, admit, gorgeous, loved it. But for me, the hook was the depth brought in with the first pre-chorus, which fell only halfway through the verse. Yeah. That to me was something really intriguing, really interesting. Don't see that too much. Usually we just complete the full verse, and that would be kind of predictable. In this case, it stepped right in there. This is in Joe, first track. Stepped right in there with "Run, you better run for your life," and the chords pull back. And then she starts, layer in the 7th, layer in the 9th, then the 11th. Things slowly get deeper.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is like, I'm in. I am in this world, and I'm near tears. And that happens so quick, all things considered, which is why it's interesting. It's a slow build, but also not, from my perspective. This is actually a lot stronger than most things. Because, just consider back, like, Hesitation Marks.
Right.
The 9 Inch Nails album. That had an intro. That had a full intro track. Which really wasn't, it didn't have a hook at all.
No.
And that to me is a slow reel in. It's like when you have a full intro track, that doesn't really offer much. It's kind of sporadic and all over the place. It's like, I don't know what to feel about this album yet. This kind of told me up front.
Yeah. Well, also, you're right, though, in the general music knowledge sense, the hook is usually referred to the chorus.
Yeah, exactly.
The breakdown associated
in this case,
with
it was a pre-chorus, and there was another hook in the actual
But typically, that's what hook means.
Yeah, it's a lot of times, it's almost synonymous with a lot of bands with breakdown.
Yeah.
Hook and breakdown, for a lot of music, kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, but I do think there should be a lot of emphasis placed on it. Well, first of all, it is subjective. I think that's our point we're getting at today, is it's definitely subjective, but emphasis needs to be placed on it just because that's where I think people are really going to change their mind about your work. It's amazing how sometimes we can listen to something like over and over and over and feel kind of nothing, despite the fact that there are hooks all over the place.
Sure,
every artist has their own idea of what should be the hook, what should ideally be the hook, the grab for an audience. That may run right over your head if you've either heard it too many times, don't have any context with which to ascribe meaning.
Or it could be something as simple as taste, and you just don't have a taste for that kind of music.
There you go.
To some extent, the hook is the most important aspect of a song. It is what will get you into it.
Yeah.
A song with no trigger, with no piece that draws you in, is going to go over your head. If you can't find it, then it stops being subjective. Then it truly becomes an objective view of the music. in order to connect on it on a subjective level. And that's what we want to bring to people, is to point out, that's kind of what we do here. We want to show people why they should like or dislike music. We're showing
well,
them...
you can't necessarily.
That's...
But yes, we're trying to cover as many bases as possible for the person.
And we try to explain to people what the hook is here, what the hook
It's amazing,
is there.
because we only expect you to really trust us into about 30% of what we do, ideally.
Also, before we get too far off track and before we wrap up, I do want to say, as far as this album goes, it's worth hearing. Hands down, even though my rating wasn't as high as theirs, if this is from listen, hear, buy, it's definitely a listen. This is not an album to miss.
Even I won't say this is a buy, because it's clear this is a taste thing.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I wanted to go back to, is in terms of taste, because I threw around the word impressionism. And you guys also said that impressionism isn't the kind of thing that's necessarily going to grab every person at every time.
Correct.
I do indeed agree with that, because there's another example I have. The Rachels, well, just Rachels actually, did some stuff back in the 90s. They still do things here and there. Instrumentals mostly, except for certain things here and there. But this was a specific work of theirs, 1996, Music for Egon Schiele, which was shown to me back in college. This was... It really does not belong in its time at all. This is really a retro work of the kind of impressionism that you would get out of the late 19th century, early 20th century. Music for Egon Schiele. If you could just look at the cover, you would see these late 19th century, early 20th century artists. Guys who are the kind of artists who really pushed the boundaries in terms of what was acceptable at art at the time. Because there were crazy things going on with visual art. They'd start drawing abstract pictures, things that were almost meant to haunt you in some way, while at the same time not really saying anything necessarily, just giving you an impression. Right. And that's what musicians started doing around the same time. Right. Whether it was just a coincidence or just a movement of people's philosophy at the time, it started happening. Debussy was one of the first, and then keep going with Ravel and several other artists. Right. Eric Satie, Gymnopedes. These are actually kind of common known things nowadays. If you heard some of these pieces, even if you might not know the names, you'd know them.
Okay.
And yet, this album here was harkening back to that. The Music for Egon Schiele was harkening back to these sounds, and it was just simple violin, viola, and, viola, piano, cello. Just that trio. And I adore this album. This is probably what I would even call near to 5 stars, if not 5. But I sacrifice the subjectivity of it, because I know that even I can't listen to it all the time. I have to go back to it sparsely. It's like a 3 o'clock in the morning kind of thing. Just as for you, this album today is college and weed apparently, but for me,
not that I ever smoked weed in college,
not at all. But for me, this
it
that
was high school,
that kind of thing is 3 in the morning. There you go.
Okay, well, I think that's a good way to kind of wrap up our hook discussion. So
I just want to say, I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think...
No, I don't either.
No.
I don't either.
I don't think that should be counted in ratings at all.
No.
It's a mood thing. That's a different type of art.
I told you. That's not why...
A different type of art, and that's my point.
Right, and I told you that's not why I brought it down to where I did. I explained why I did.
Yeah.
But why don't you give us our spam email of the week?
Oh, great.
I'm so feels right now.
Everyone should be feels.
I'm saying with different inflection, which is why it's different feels.
Feelsies. Payment schemes on health information exchangeable. We all have this story where we go on a date with all of the various kinds of people that way. Separate sentences, by the way. Separate sentence. And it doesn't depend a variety of health information exchange site if it's paid or free one. But it seems that even if this is true, but I find that incredibly depressing, this is the best idea if you go on dates. There are many coaching centers also available in online, through which you can get some of the other. By relationship counseling quiz.
I just didn't connect.
Yeah, you didn't feel it?
No, I didn't feel it.
Didn't feel it?
And to be
It
honest...
was nonsensical, erratic, and
melody.
Yet simple.
It was simple.
simpleton, maybe.
No, that was
Actually,
was
yes,
true.
quite yet simple, and I do mean the derogatory form of simple.
That's I'd give that no higher than a 1.5.
1.5, huh?
Yeah.
That's a 0 in my book.
It's a shame.
No.
Well.
No, it doesn't tell us to go murder babies or something like that. That's a 0.
Just make sure we only do this with spam mail. We're not actually going to rate real people. If there's a real piece, we're not going to rate you. Don't worry.
No, yeah.
We'll just
No.
So please,
You're
on that
we'll be
note,
happy if you said great.
yes, please comment on the site. Send us an email. You can find it on the our email on the website. All of that stuff. We finally hit over 200 likes on Facebook. So if you haven't, go like us on Facebook.
Keep going.
My album choice for next week is actually going to be our first complete acoustic record. I'm choosing by the band or musician Everlast, formerly of House of Pain, who's a solo artist now, well known for, of course, his debut album Whitey Ford Sings the Blues and songs like What It's Like and Black Jesus. He recently released an all-acoustic record because he'd been touring only doing acoustic, called The Life Acoustic. And if that sounds familiar to The Life Aquatic, you are correct, because the album cover is actually a spoof on the Life Aquatic cover, except it's him cartoonishly drawn with a beanie on that says Everlast.
Interesting.
You just spoiled it for me. That's it.
Oh, stop. So
need
this
to
is
review.
this is an all acoustic record. It's mostly a greatest hits of his works from his different albums he's done. So it should be interesting.
So it's two things. It's greatest hits and acoustic. Two things we haven't done before.
Yeah, but it's also like it doesn't have every one of his hits. Like What It's Like isn't on there. So
Okay.
we'll see. But it's definitely something different. So yeah, that's all for this week. So I guess while John shoves a pen down his throat, we'll wrap up by saying, as always,
You got to choke on that pen.
That's not what we always say.
music is life,
And
and life
Gotta
is
choke
good.
on that pen.